Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Stock Market Today. Alyssa Corman, Justin Nielsen here with a breakdown of the action in today's session, where it was a pretty standout day for growth. Small caps also looking good on the day. Justin, give us a breakdown of what we'll be discussing.
Well, it's still right in the middle of earnings season. This is a very busy week, and so we'll go ahead and start with a couple earnings, plays that happened today, Generac and AMD. And then also, there's a lot of stuff going on in those steel producers and miners, and we'll take a look at Cleveland Cliffs.
Sounds like a plan. But first, an overview of what went down in today's session. Here's a look at the NASDAQ, which gained 0.7% for the day. On the downside, we had the Dow down about 0.4%, the S&P slightly lower on the day, and the Russell 2000 up about 0.7%. And FFTY, the IBD 50 growth ETF, up about 2.4% for the day. So growth really taking charge in today's session.
Yeah, and I mean, this kind of last week we had the reversal that happened on the NASDAQ composite, really strong move off the bottom there. And so again, it was a great week for a lot of investors, and growth was definitely in favor. And then of course yesterday's action happened, and so it's like, oh no, here we go again. Are we pulling back? But just one day, and not even that, it was off the lows yesterday, and now we're following up. And so there was more to do today. It's again, the buy on the dip mentality is strong with this one, and growth is again benefiting. In this case, the NASDAQ composite handily beat the S&P 500, so it's definitely in the driver's seat right now, with a lot of the stocks in that kind of tech area really kind of shining right now. But as you mentioned, FFTY, I think it's worth taking a quick look at that. We use this as kind of a proxy for growth, and you see that it's been very difficult, for the last few months. It really topped in February, and it's been struggling, but it did get support at its 200-day moving average line. And whereas the NASDAQ composite was moving to new highs because of the Microsofts, the Amazons, the Apples, basically your $1 trillion club in market cap, that wasn't very broad. And so IBD 50, the FFTY, really kind of reflects that, but it certainly seems like that's coming on a little bit stronger. So we'll see if growth can continue here. The biggest issue probably is, we were feeling a little extended a couple days ago. We pulled back. It was like, oh, that's great. But now we're right back up to almost those highs, and we're gonna feel extended pretty soon if we continue much higher.
Yeah, the NASDAQ about 4% above the 50-day line, and QQQ, which tracks the NASDAQ 100, up about 5.3% from its 50-day. So we'll have to see. And there's a ton more earnings reports to come. And also maybe a note on the Fed, because that.
Oh yeah, there was that, huh? So of course, a lot of people.
Listen, Justin.
Yeah, a lot of people were waiting for the Fed announcement today. They wrapped up their 2-day meeting, and basically there were no surprises. There's no real change here. The inflationary part, they're still saying that they see it as transitory. They're still seeing an economic recovery in progress here. The one thing that was maybe a little bit of a shift was a hint at the potential of tapering later this year, but it really didn't seem to spook investors. So I think that's no news is good news.
Okay, perfect. And among earnings movers, we have to talk about Generac. What a stunning day for the stock, down 11 or so % in the early going, but a huge comeback, touching its 50-day line, but closing all the way back up at the 21-day line, down just 1.8% for the day. So even though they commented about how input costs were impacting the business here, investors really supporting the stock. I mean, if this isn't a resilient growth stock, I don't know what is.
Right. And, we were talking before the show, both you and I own this. I think we got in almost at the same time. So twinsies there, and we were talking about this on IBD Live. So maybe go ahead and flip to the intraday chart here, because what we saw was, again, the immediate drop. And look, 10% drops, they make me want to cry, sure. But I try not to react too quickly. And what I do is I kind of wait to get some sense of direction. And it did pull back a little bit, but within like the first hour, it seemed like it was getting support. So we were down over 13%, I think, at one point, Allie. And then we saw that comeback, and we were talking about this on IBD Live. Hey, if it does get support here at the 50-day moving average line, maybe this is a chance to even add to shares. I personally didn't have the guts to do that. I was, and then of course, you always get distracted a little bit later, and so when it finally looks right, you're maybe doing other things. But throughout the rest of the day, if you were able to kind of hold through that first hour, it really kind of, came back in a very big way. The other thing that we were mentioning on IBD Live was that the conference call was going on during the market hours. So sometimes it does help to kind of get a sense of what happens during that conference call, because they do give some color to the numbers. We were on the show, so we couldn't listen to the conference call, but it's important sometimes to just look at what's happening to the stock during that time.
Exactly. Yeah, this is a great lesson, and one of the, I guess I got lucky on here, Justin, but it shows that if you have that sort of knee-jerk reaction at the beginning, you never know what's going to happen with a stock on its earnings report. I think that this scenario makes it very clear.
Well, I'm going to correct you real quick, Allie. I'm not going to say that you got lucky, because I'm going to say that you had a good cushion. Like you had a good cushion going into this, and you had some rules. Now, granted, you had the benefit of IBD Live in your ear, kind of guiding you
and tying me up, really,
right? And tying you up so you couldn't
focus and attention.
So sometimes that's a good thing, and a lot of times it's good to wait until the end of the day before you react, as long as you're not seeing the destruction continue. And in this case, Generac flattened out, and so I think we both came out of this okay.
Yeah, if you see the destruction continue, different game plan there, but that's what we went through the scenario analysis. Okay, if this happens, what do you do?
Exactly.
Always good to talk about that plan. Okay, AMD also on the list today with a nice move up about 7.6%. Heavy volume behind the move on its earnings report. The heaviest volume in a long time, Justin, really
since its last earnings report.
Yeah, since his last earnings report. So a good breakout. And not only was there an early entry here that we acted upon for swing trader, but then it also followed that through with a breakout above that official cup with handle buy point.
Right. So we were sneaking into this on Swing Trader as it crossed above the high, yesterday's high. And so, when it was kind of showing that kind of power, we used that as an opportunity to get in, and it just continued moving higher throughout the day, just inching up until you got that 7.5% gain, as you mentioned, and above that 95.54 cup with handle buy point. Now, the leaderboard actually already had this on the leaderboard previously from that break above like the 89.30 area. And so they actually had an earlier entry, and because of the cushion that they had, they held this through earnings. I should mention that Generac was actually a leaderboard stock too, that they decided to hold through earnings. So there were a couple different spots where you could get into this. If you did get into that later entry, the one that Swing Trader did, you have some good cushion now. We actually took our first third of profit there. But if you're doing this as a position trade, you could have either gotten in at that Swing Trader entry or at the traditional entry of 95.54. And so far, you've got a little bit of cushion on that. So we'll see how this plays out. The one thing I will say that did give us a little bit of pause was that this is a lower relative strength stock. The relative strength rating is 54 on this one. But if you look at this weekly chart, you can see the cup with handle is formed here. And this was a time where the S&P 500 was getting to new highs, and this was basing. So you can kind of see why the relative strength line would be struggling a little bit, and why that relative strength line might be a little bit weaker.
Yeah, moving in the right direction now, which is good to see. And we had NVIDIA earnings in a couple weeks. So earnings have now passed. That risk is off here for AMD. NVIDIA's earnings are in a couple more weeks. So we'll have to see how that might potentially impact the stock or not. So now let's go to CLF. You mentioned steel garnering some attention. So CLF up almost 6% for the day. And maybe investors could have snuck in today with this entry above the 23.55 level.
Yeah, I mean that's certainly feasible. I would actually argue that even better entry was as this was coming above its 50-day moving average line. Because again, it did have that reversal last week, and it seemed like a lot of these steel producers were coming back on our radar. Of course, the problem with that is you did have earnings. That's been the problem with so many of
Right.
these is you've got earnings, and it's really hard to make a call like that. But I think you're absolutely right, Allie. Now that earnings are out of the way, I think that was kind of an entry point. There are still earnings coming out on a lot of these miners and stuff. So you've got Vale, Rio. There's a number of them that are going to be coming out in the next few days. So be aware of that.
Yeah.
But this is an area where we're seeing a lot of setups in this particular group. So keep an eye on it, and maybe take some action just to have some exposure to that group.
Okay, thanks so much, Justin. And before we go, Facebook earnings are out with the company beating expectations. It looks like the stock, however, down, at least the initial reaction to the report, down just shy of 4%. So, Justin, what do you make of this early reaction?
Well, this is the thing is a lot of times there's a knee-jerk reaction, and sometimes you don't quite know why. It can change a lot. So we always warn people, don't necessarily take the after hours or pre-market action as gospel. You kind of need to see what happens when it opens. But this didn't give an entry anytime recently. So most investors have probably been holding on to this for a while, in which case I think you've got that enough cushion to kind of see how it trades. So don't do the knee-jerk reaction. You and I learned that from Generac. Take a look, see how it trades, see if there's any direction after the first 15 minutes, 30 minutes, maybe the first hour. If you're starting to see destruction and something maybe more serious is happening, then you could take some action, or you could shed a little bit. Remember, you don't have to do all or nothing. You could just shed a little bit. But just wait and see if it does show some recovery, because so far Facebook has been one of those leading stocks, as a lot of the FANG stocks have been.
Okay, and so a beat on both the top and bottom lines for Facebook. Looks like weekly and monthly active users mostly in line with expectations. And another report that, while we're here, we might as well touch on: Ford out with its results, beating earnings expectations and raising its guidance. Justin, this early reaction for Ford, the stock up about 2%. What do you
Yeah,
think?
and I'd be interested to see if this is something that breaks above that downtrend. Now, of course, the relative strength line has been coming down. It's still below its 50-day moving average line, but you could easily see this with some power start breaking that downtrend line and look a little interesting. This is one that we've played a number of times on Swing Trader and Leaderboard, because it's just been offering some pretty decent setups.
All right, well, maybe just a sneak preview as a taste of what's to come in tomorrow morning's IBD Live, where we are analyzing stocks in real time, actionable opportunities, portfolio management tips, our take on overall market conditions, and so much more, Justin. It's always a lot of fun, and especially during earnings season, it's pretty exciting.
And don't forget that tomorrow, the podcast is going to be dropping. Arusha's triumphant return to the podcast. So I'm actually going to go tape that right now.
Go ahead. And we also have Jason Thompson on IB Live tomorrow. So another thing to look forward to. Lots of great content coming out. All right, well, you got to go to the podcast. All right, everyone, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you back here tomorrow.